We are going through the people who may run for the state's highest office. Last week, we interviewed Attorney General Richard Blumenthal, and today we have Stamford Mayor Dan Malloy. Mayor Malloy, welcome back to Face the State. Nice to see you.
It's great to be here.
You're very tired this week. You went to Saudi Arabia.
I was there. It was a fascinating trip.
Now, you watched Mr. Blumenthal's interview, and you had said that your decision is sort of contingent on what he decides to do. What did you make of what he said about running for governor?
Well, you know, I'm going to take Dick at his word. He told you that he would make his pronouncement the first week of January or sooner. And I think that's appropriate. The reality is the Democratic Party needs to have this race begin in earnest. If Dick is not going to run, then we're going to have to select a candidate. Ultimately, I think if Dick was to decide to run for governor, he would be our candidate. But if that's not going to happen, then the party needs to move along. And clearly, given the opportunity, I would run.
Our panel of experts believes that he's not going to run for governor, that he really wants to be a senator. Did you get that same take?
He certainly spent a lot of time talking about running for the Senate. You know, Dick's a friend, and I know that he's conflicted about this, that public service is part of what he wants to do, and so he's going to make up his decision. But, you know, there are real issues confronting the state of Connecticut, the economy certainly being first and foremost, jobs, the budget. There are real issues that need proactive leadership, and that proactive leadership has been missing from the governor's office in this state for a very long time. Listen, we rank dead last in job production and job growth. There are real problems here that a governor is supposed to address and should not have gotten us into this situation.
What's the status of you running for governor? Are you all set to run if he says he's out?
Ready, willing, and able. You know, the opposite of Sherman. I want to run for governor of the state of Connecticut. I would feel it a high honor and privilege to do so, to work with a Democratic legislature, to get the job done, to think about how do we grow jobs today, tomorrow, and for decades to come, to reposition this state in a worldwide economy where our competition is not North Carolina and South Carolina, it's China and India and Saudi Arabia and Dubai. There are real issues to be confronted, and the reality of the situation on the ground in Connecticut is families are hurting, and this governor seems to have turned a deaf ear to how do you protect Connecticut families in this global economy. There is no strategy for creating jobs and retaining jobs in the state of Connecticut, and I think ultimately this will be seen as the greatest weakness of this governor.
What would you do differently if you were governor today?
I'd be proactive. I would demonstrate leadership. You know, the governor had a press conference this week, and she was wringing her hands about the prospective $6 billion deficit. Well, you know, she needs to, you know, come to the plate and say, hey, listen, I'm partially responsible for that, and yes, we're going to have to address it. But you know what I heard the governor say is, well, we can't raise taxes, and we're going to have to do something else. But she didn't tell you what she was going to do. She didn't give any guarantees that this won't be done on the backs of labor, which I think is ultimately the intention, to take it out of labor's hide. She didn't say that she's not going to affect people in nursing homes who require services of the state. So what I was listening to is her trying to share the blame with somebody else by talking about it without giving us any solutions. That's not leadership.
If you had to give her a grade as governor, what would it be?
You've asked me that, and
I asked it again several months later.
You have loyal folks who watch every day, every week. You know, she's great at public relations. She's just marvelous at public relations. But when it comes to job growth and production, Connecticut ranks dead last. When it comes to protecting Connecticut families, we're in terrible shape. When it comes to a more equal distribution of health care, we're in terrible shape. And now we have a governor who says that she can only cut, but doesn't really want to play a leadership role. That's not going to work in the state of Connecticut. Our families will flee the state, just as our young people have done for years. You know, we rank at the very bottom of states that retain young graduates.
You know, a lot of other mayors in Connecticut say, you know, we want to be Stamford. How have you done it? How have you managed to attract companies to Stamford?
Well, it's hard work. It's a clear vision. It's proactive leadership. It's sitting down with all of the parties affected by any decision and saying, let's come to the table. Let's figure out how we're going to position, in this case, Stamford. I could do it on a bigger basis. That's why I'd like to run for governor. And get people around a table to come to a consensus on doing the right things. We streamlined the permitting process. We made it easier to build in the city of Stamford. We answer questions directly. If we tell you you we think we can get you an approval for a particular building or a style of building or a new use for a piece of property, you can pretty much take that to the bank. That's the kind of leadership that we've demonstrated in the city of Stamford. It's one of the reasons that in a state that didn't grow jobs over the last 20 years, Stamford did grow jobs. It's one of the reasons that our population increased. You know, I'm in my 13th year, just about to start my 14th year as mayor. Our population's increased by about 14,000 people, but our jobs have increased as well. These are important statistics.
Will you run for re-election as mayor again?
Oh, you know, currently my intention is to run. I love being a mayor of the city of Stamford, and there are only two jobs that I'd want to do in the state of Connecticut.
Is it fair to run for both at the same time?
I've done it.
Is it fair?
As you well know, sure. I think it's fair if you're getting the job done. Listen, when I put my head down at night, the last thought I have is about Stamford, and when I get up in the morning, I'm going to work on Stamford issues. But when it comes to the future of the state of Connecticut, imagine what it would be for a mayor to have an ally in the governor's office. Imagine what it would be to be the mayor of any one of the 169 municipalities in the state of Connecticut and recognize for the first time that the person sitting in the governor's mansion actually wants to work with you in improving the economy of the state of Connecticut, wants to work with you in making sure the citizens are well protected and have the resources necessary to do well for themselves and for their Connecticut family.
Why did you fall short last time, you think?
Well, you know, it was a strange year, as you well know. There was this other race about the Senate that I think
took some attention,
took some attention the other way, and I happened to have been on a line with a guy who lost by 9 or 10%, and I lost by 1. But you know, rather than look at not having gotten quite over the finish line in that case, there are some tremendous lessons learned: how to run a campaign, how to run a primary, which I suspect we'll end up having, getting my name recognition up very substantially. In the state
that brings up a good point, because you have to spend a lot of time in the Hartford, New Haven area. How do you do that?
I did it. I mean, as you well know, I did it. And,
you were up
and the difference between 4 years ago when I undertook a race for governor and today is I'm much better known in the state of Connecticut, and people know the Stamford story and what we've accomplished in Stamford, and clearly people know that we're prepared to work with all of the constituent political forces in the state. You know, I'm looking at the message that the governor is sending out, and quite clearly it's, well, we're going to have to, you know, balance this budget on the backs of labor. I don't agree.
What makes you a more attractive candidate than, let's say, a Susan Beisowitz or Jim Amon?
Well, you know, Jim's running. Yeah. I'm waiting to make that final decision, and we'll do so shortly. I'll hold Dick to the promise he made on this show.
I believe he committed to being here the first week in January.
And I'm committing to be here the second week of January. And you didn't even ask.
We're going to book you today.
But the difference is I've actually managed. I mean, for 14 years, almost 14 years, I've been the mayor of the city of Stamford. I've had ups and downs in the budget. I've seen, you know, the .com bust. I've seen post 9/11 and seen what it's done to budgets. Stamford's the 4th safest city in America. When I became mayor, it was the 35th safest city in America. Stamford has more jobs, more housing, more development, is better positioned than it was 13 or 14 years ago in a state which has been badly led by Republican governors who have done nothing to grow the job base, the economic base, or take care of the budget in the state of Connecticut.
Stamford Mayor Dan Malloy, we'll see you the second week in January, unless, of course, there's a surprise announcement from Richard Blumenthal. Nice to see you again, sir. Thank you very much.